It started with the biggest pipe bomb the FBI had ever seen.
There is a bomb in Centennial Park. You have 30 minutes.
It ended in a dumpster after the largest manhunt in American history.
My knees knocked so hard that I was about to answer them. That's how nervous I was.
Eric Rudolph and the rise of anger.
Domestic terrorism has been metastasizing across the country for a long time now.
True story, true crime, true consequences for us all.
American Shrapnel, from award-winning journalists Becca Andrews and John Archibald, two-time winner of the Pulitzer Prize. Now available wherever you get your podcasts.
USAA knows dynamic duos can save the day, like superheroes and sidekicks or auto and home insurance. With USAA, you can bundle your auto and home and save up to 10%. Learn more and get a quote at usaa.com/bundle. Restrictions apply.
Buckeye Talk is about to begin. Hey, 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 come on in.
Welcome back to Buckeye Talk. I'm Stephen Means, that's Stefan Krajisnik, and that is Andrew Gillis. This is your Tuesday pod. We talked with Ryan Day coming off of Ohio State's first scrimmage of fall camp, the first of three that they'll have heading into its season opener against Texas, which is officially a top three matchup. The AP poll came out Monday afternoon. Texas is number one, Penn State's number two, Ohio State number three, Clemson number four, and Georgia number five. The other Big Ten teams are in this. 7, Illinois. You got number 12. 7 is Oregon, 12 is Illinois, 14 is Michigan, and 20 Indiana. Stefan, top three matchup in the shoe at noon. You excited? You ready?
Yeah. If only I knew a AP voter who I can get a hold of and give him a hard time for this not being a 1 versus 2 game. If anyone knows someone who votes in the AP poll and can come on our podcast to discuss why Texas and Ohio State aren't number 1 versus number 2, I'd love to know.
It's not my fault. Okay, it's not my fault why they're not number 1 and number 2. Andrew, let's just do that. No, I'm not going to ask Stefan this question. One, because he just gave me a hard time. 2, because he used to vote in this league. Andrew, if you were an AP voter, what would have been your top 5?
Texas, Penn State, Ohio State, Clemson, Notre Dame. That would have been my top 5. The only beef that I really had was I would have flipped Notre Dame and Georgia. Outside of that, I think there's going to be a lot of people who are upset by the fact that Ohio State is 1, the defending national champion, and 2, not 1 or 2. And I think people wanted the 1 versus 2 matchup. I think the pollers did the responsible thing. Maybe not the fun thing.
How was that the responsible thing when the team they put at number 1 also has a new starting quarterback and lost a bunch of guys to the NFL?
Yeah, I think there's a little bit more juice around Texas's entire team. I think there's a little bit more juice around why. I couldn't tell you why. I mean, I'm not responsible for that.
I can tell you why. It's the quarterback position.
It's because they've named their quarterback and his last name is Manning.
Yeah,
that's what it is. They named their quarterback in January and his last name is Manning. I think that here's how this was my poll. I don't have Texas or Ohio State at number 1. I have Penn State, who, if Texas didn't have a Manning, would have been number 1. I saw there's 5 points that separate Penn State and Texas. And I'm wondering where that 5-point separation came from. How many of those voters were south of the Mason-Dixon line and how many were north of the Mason-Dixon line in terms of where their residence is. Penn State was number 1 for me because their roster construction is literally the same roster construction that we just saw from the last 2 national champions. Outside of guys who are clear, I'm going to be a top 7 pick, I have no choice but to leave, everybody came back, plus they sprinkled in a couple transfers. They didn't go as crazy with the transfers as Ohio State did in terms of the name recognition, but that's what they did. And I get it. People don't believe in James Franklin. That's not what the point of a preseason poll is supposed to be. You're supposed to evaluate the rosters for what they are and then rank them. And if we are going to watch 2 teams essentially go, hey, we're going to run it back, and then they win a national title, why would we not have Penn State number 1 when they're doing the same thing? While for me, if you don't have Texas above Ohio State, fine, whatever. For me, my tiebreaker between Ohio State and Texas, Stefan, was one team has Jeremiah Smith and Caleb Downs, who are the best two players in college football, and the other team does not. Do they have good players? Yes. Ryan Wingo is unproven. Colin Simmons is awesome. He is not bar none the best player at his position, let alone the best player in the country. There are other good defensive ends in the country as well. I had Clemson number 4, and I had Notre Dame number 5, and then we don't have to get into the rest of it. But that top 5 for me came down to one team looks like the last 2 teams that won a national title. The 2 and 3 teams are the same team, except one team's got a generational player on both sides of the ball. And then I put Clemson over Notre Dame because Cade Klubnik's better than whoever Notre Dame starting quarterback is.
I think your reasoning, I don't disagree with. The one thing I will say, maybe to rebuttal the Penn State number 1 thing is, like, yeah, the roster and everything is in place. Like, I do think you can respect that, like, coach is part of that evaluation, right? Like he's still the coach of that team. Like, sure. if there's a let's say Georgia had the same exact roster as Penn State, you'd be sitting there saying, okay, well, I trust Kirby Smart more than I trust James Franklin.
But we're not comparing him to Kirby Smart. We're comparing him to another guy who, for all intents and purposes, Texas's head coach hasn't won a national title either. But I'm with you with the coach evaluation. If the conversation was who should be number 1, Ohio State or Penn State, and it comes down to the coaches, okay, then I understand if the tiebreaker for you is Ryan Day has a national championship, James Franklin doesn't. Dabo Swinney has a national championship, James Franklin doesn't. Kirby Smart has a national championship, James Franklin doesn't. But that's like the list. There's 3 guys who have national champions. So I don't know if James Franklin's lack of wins against big teams in a world where I don't know how many wins Texas has over big teams is that, like, they got to the same spot last year. Yep. And one has their quarterback back and the other one doesn't.
Yeah, I get that. Were you surprised that the gap between first place votes for Ohio State and Penn State or Texas was that big? Ohio State hasn't been preseason number 1 in the AP poll since 2015, which was them coming off a national title. It was a little surprising to me that, like, we've kind of gone through this offseason and it's sort of just been assumed that, like, Ohio State won't be preseason number 1. And I don't know why that's the case. The Penn State argument I get in the sense of, like, they're bringing everyone back. But why has it been like, all right, do you respect Penn State enough, or are you going to put Texas ahead of them? Like, it's definitely a quarterback thing, because I really don't know why Texas, without a doubt, is like, if they're not preseason number 1, they're number 2. Whereas Ohio State, it's like, they probably won't have enough first place votes to be number 1.
Andrew, if Ryan Day had named his starting quarterback in January, does Ohio State have a bit stronger case for number 1? In a world where the 2 teams they're behind, they also have 5-star quarterbacks who we've known were going to be their starting quarterbacks for literal months at this point.
So I think it depends. And it depends on what you're asking. If you're asking if Ohio State's Ryan Day said Julian Sands our starting quarterback on February 1st, and then there was this, like, push, like it felt like there kind of was with Texas of Manning, right. I think that's then sure. Like, if Ryan Day got out there and was just like, hey guys, Julian's the quarterback, and then we'd all just kind of, like, went about our business. Mm-hmm. I don't know, but there has definitely been, like, let's throw Arch out there and throw him as, like, the number 1 guy, and he's the Heisman and blah, blah. Okay, all right. Like, if you're going to say that, then I think that's fair. I have kind of chuckled at this debate all off season because we've talked about, is this going to be preseason number 1 or number 2, or is it definitely a top 5 game, but blah, blah, blah. Whoever wins this game is going to be number 1 the next week. Right. So I was, like, kind of, like, laughing at it. I mean, hey, look, no disrespect to Nevada, but unless the Wolfpack come out there and lose 400-0, I don't think Penn State's going to hang on to that number 2 seed if if Ohio State wins. So Penn State's going to be number 2 no matter what, I think, in that second week. They're 45.5-point favorites. They're going to beat Nevada. But Ohio State or Texas is going to be number 1. And then Clemson plays LSU. So, like, Clemson's going to be either 4 or LSU's going to. So it's kind of like, I was like, all offseason we've had all these debates, and then we get the official AP poll today. We get 1-3, we get 4-9, and then we get 6-10. So, we will know a lot more. It feels like maybe a lot more than we've known in previous weeks, in previous week twos. Like, it feels like we're going to know a decent amount about Ohio State and Texas, and we're going to know a decent amount about Clemson and LSU, and we're going to know a decent amount about Notre Dame and Miami. Not saying that they're finished products, but okay, this is kind of where they're at right now, and this is where they need to get to. I think we're going to know a decent amount.
Yeah, I agree with you. We're going to know how far they are away from their ceiling. I don't know if we're going to know finished products. I'm with you. This is the Ohio State-Oregon game all over again from last year, except they don't have to spend 5 weeks waiting to play each other. They get to play each other week 1, and the winner is going to be number 1. And the loser, assuming this is a competitive game, let's just say the game is 27-21. Whoever scores 21 points is probably going to drop to like 5 or 6 at worst after this game. Some context, I know we did all those rewatches over the summer of all the games. Remember 2005 when Texas came to Columbus, they were number 2 and Ohio State was number 4. Texas won that game in 2006. Number 1 versus number 2, Ohio State was number 1. Texas was number 2. Ohio State won in Austin. So in the 2 times that they were a home and home earlier in the 2000s, the road team was the higher ranked team, and they also won that game. I guess we'll see what that means for 2025 if history repeats itself a little bit. And then in 2009, Texas was number 3. Ohio State was number 10 in the Fiesta Bowl. Texas won that game. And then 9 months ago, Texas was number 3 in 2009. 2025, Texas was number 5. Ohio State was number 8 in the Cotton Bowl as part of the college football playoff semifinals. And Ohio State won that game. That is the only time that the lower ranked team has won this game. And we'll get more into that context as we get closer to the season. As Ryan Day said, they're not fully on Texas prep yet. They're not on Texas prep. So we'll get more into Texas prep probably 7 days from now when Ohio State is also deeper into Texas prep. Let's take a break and then we'll get into what Ryan Day said, which essentially boiled down to 2 things. When's he going to name a starting quarterback? And a guy we've been hyping up on the offensive line deserves a little bit more hype here on Buckeye Talk.
The Disney Plus Hulu HBO Max bundle. Plan starting at just $16.99 a month. Catch Limitless, Live Better Now Season 1 with Chris Hemsworth on Disney Plus.
We got a lot of work to do.
Alien Earth on Hulu.
This ship collected monsters.
And Final Destination Bloodlines on HBO Max.
Death is coming for our family.
The Disney Plus Hulu HBO Max bundle. Plan starting at $16.99 a month. All these and more streaming soon. Visit Disney Plus Hulu HBO Max bundle.com for details.
Does it ever feel like you're a marketing professional just speaking into the void? Well, with LinkedIn ads, you can know you're reaching the right decision makers. You can even target buyers by job title, industry, company, seniority, skills. Wait, did I say job title yet? Get started today and see how you can avoid the void and reach the right buyers with LinkedIn ads. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Get started at linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply.
We're back here on Buckeye Talk. Stephen Means, Stefan Krajisnik, and Andrew Gillis. Ohio State 3 weeks away from playing number 1 Texas at home August 30th on Big Noon Kickoff. Just how you love it, man. That's exactly what you want. That's exactly what you want in life. You want number 1 versus number 3 at 12 o'clock in the afternoon. That's exactly what everybody – that's what college football was made for. Noon games where it's 2 of the top 3 teams in the country. Stefan, no quarterback this week. Why is there no quarterback yet?
Because I don't think Ryan Day was ever going to name a quarterback before 2 scrimmages.
Did you think about that on the drive home from the Woody of, the more I think about this, he was never going to name a starting quarterback after the first scrimmage?
I thought about it on my drive to the Woody because there was no point on my drive where I was like, what if Ryan Day names a starting quarterback today?
Same. Yeah, I just was kind of like, he's not. I got to the Woody maybe about 45 minutes before the presser started. And I get there and I sit down and I'm like, there's no way he's naming this quarterback.
But I think the way the timeline sets up, like naming a starting quarterback on Monday the 18th just kind of makes sense, right? You give yourself 2 scrimmages, you let Lincoln and Julian battle it out, and then you say, hey, we essentially get 2 weeks of game prep as opposed to 1 week of game prep like you would normally in a season. You say, all right, let's go full go Texas prep. We get 2 weeks to do so. Here's a guy who's going to take the snaps with all the ones to get him ready to go. And we'll see who that is. I still think it's going to be Julian Sand, but I think that we learned again today that, Lincoln Keenels is doing all the right things to try to make this as much of a competition as you can. And a lot of that stems off the field because Ryan Day talked about Julian, praised his decision-making, timing, all the things that he feels, command of the huddle as areas that he's kind of progressed in. And essentially he said, when you ask a player to go through this and you look for them to make proper progressions, Julian Sain has done that. Like, he's developing in the way that Ohio State wants him to develop. But the leadership and off the field stuff also matters a ton to Ohio State at the quarterback position. And it's why it was so interesting when Ryan Day ended his press conference pretty emphatically talking about what Iron Buckeye means. And his quote, which I'm going to pull up here, his quote was, have there been guys who have done really well, been Golden Iron Buckeyes that haven't played a lot? Yeah, but not many. So for Lincoln Kienholz to be the only quarterback to ever get Iron Buckeye tells you that he is firmly in this quarterback competition. There's something about him that Ohio State likes and can't seem to look away from, regardless of how talented and how well developing Julian Sain is. So that a lot of today felt like quarterback competition is still going on. Julian's physical traits still lead the way, and it's going to be hard to not start him. But it's also really hard to ignore the Iron Buckeye stuff at the end that Ryan Day talked about. And we said that when the Iron Buckeyes came out, we said right away, and we even said at Big Ten Media Days when Ryan Day had kind of mentioned the possibility of a quarterback winning Iron Buckeye, that if there's a quarterback who's named an Iron Buckeye, it's not nothing. And I think that kind of reaffirms that the way that Ryan Day talked about it on Monday.
And if Julian Sain had been an Iron Buckeye, would we have been saying, would Ryan Day have named the starting?
It's a good question. Maybe
we would have.
I was gonna. So that was gonna be what my next thing was.
Okay, let me rephrase that then. I'm sorry. When that list came out, and he was one of the Iron Buckeyes, along with the likes of Jeremiah Smith, Jalen McClain, Austin Saravelt, who we'll get into later, Carnell, guys who we know for sure are going to start or at bare minimum have a role, because Jalen McClain and Malik Hartford, that is a battle, but there's a world where both of those guys are playing because Caleb Downs is playing nickel. But the other 7 guys who were Iron Buckeyes, we have no problem saying they're going to play starter level snaps. Some of them are going to be the superstars of this team. Why do we not feel that way about the one quarterback who was on the list when Ryan Day keeps emphasizing how important that is?
It's a good philosophical question. I think we maybe gravitate towards the arm talent side of things. I think that is probably it. This is definitely like I'm laying on a couch and somebody just asked me, how does that make you feel? I feel like I'm just asking to diagnose a deeper kind of issue here. It's an interesting point, but I think that's part of it. We see the arm talent of Julian, and I think, let me answer your question with a question. If Lincoln is the starter August 30th, would we not come on this pod and say, well, intangibles and maybe leadership and all of the things in the practice facility that are not on the field, in the weight room and in the meeting room, that won out more than the field? I feel like that would be kind of the prevailing notion. And then I'm sure Ryan would push back and say, no, Lincoln's a great passer and blah, blah, blah. But the whole time, like you said, Ryan has been pushing this, here's what it means to be an Iron Buckeye. Here's what it means to be a leader. And here's what it means to be a guy in the weight room that people can look up to and blah, blah, blah. I feel like if Lincoln's the guy, that's probably what we would say, right? So I don't know. I think for us, in the media maybe, and certainly probably for fans as well, they're looking at it going, well, this guy's a better passer. Make him the starting quarterback. And maybe we're doing a little bit of that as well.
I think there's to go to your philosophical aspect, is there's an element to quarterback that's unlike anything in sports. And it's why we're having this discussion, right? Has anyone ever asked, does LeBron speak up during a timeout? Do you care if Kevin Durant says something to his teammates during a timeout? No, because he's going to go get you a bucket.
Right.
And I don't care what he's saying when they're huddled in a timeout, right? We're not saying that about Jokic or Giannis or LeBron or KD. So if this was basketball, we're probably looking at Julian being that guy's a bucket. Shout out Lincoln, great sixth man off the bench, great glue guy. But end of the game, Julian Sain is going to get you a bucket, which is ironic because Lincoln Kienholz is objectively the better basketball player of the two. But in football, in football, we saw last year, Cam Ward went number 1 overall. I think if you asked Ohio State, who would you rather have been your quarterback last year, they were just fine with Will Howard because of the different traits that go into being quarterback. And I think that's why this conversation is so interesting. We all know that Julian Sain has the better arm talent, can make the better passes. But we also saw last year that that's not the only thing that goes into leading a college football team to a national title.
So let me ask you this real quick, because you said that the Cam Ward point, I don't think anybody would doubt that. I mean, Cam Ward was the number 1 overall pick, right? And I don't mean this in a leading way. I'm genuinely just throwing it out there. Is that wise every year of we don't need the best quarterback, we need the right one? Is that why? Yes, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Like,
Because
so.
you want to know why? Because Ryan Day's had Cam Ward before. TJ Stroud was a number 2 pick in the NFL draft. Justin Fields was a number 11 quarterback in his NFL draft, right? This is not a situation where Ryan Day's had a bunch of guys where you would point to their intangibles first, and then they go 6th round of the NFL draft, and you go, oh, would you take this guy over this guy? Of course, that guy's better than that guy. Cam Ward is a better quarterback than Will Howard, objectively speaking. Yes, the NFL literally just told us that. But that's not, there's more to, especially here, the team we cover, Texas is probably like this, out blue blood schools, where there is a different level of attention. This isn't the NFL where like Cam Ward's going to be the Titans court. I don't think Titan fans are going to be burn down the house if Cam Ward has 5 interceptions in his first 3 games. You know what fan base in the NFL is going to be like, burn down the house if he has 5 interceptions in his first 3 games? The Dallas Cowboys. You brought up LeBron, Stefan. So LeBron's like the outlier in that. If LeBron's first game against the Kings back in 2003, he had like 12 points. Burn down the house. LeBron James is a bust. Oh! Because he's LeBron James, right? There's Ohio State is the Cowboys. They're the Yankees. They're LeBron James. They're the Lakers. There is a different level of attention on you that Justin Fields and CJ Stroud and Kyle McCord all had to get used to. Will Howard even admitted he had to get used to it. He just did a better job at it because he was a grown man by the time he had the job and not 19 years old the way CJ Stroud and Justin Fields and potentially Julian Sand might be, or 20 years old the way Kyle McCord or Lincoln Kienholz might be. So I don't want to just brush it off as just, oh, if Lincoln won the job, it's just the intangibles. He's a pretty good quarterback, which is why the intangibles matter more. Because everybody Ryan Day brings in here is like, who's the worst quarterback they've had still went higher than the dude he won a national championship with. He was still a 5-star coming out of high school. So like talent is not a problem here. And I think that's part of the point here. Arm talent's only going to get you so far. And I think we've allowed Julian Sand's arm talent to carry him 9 months in this battle. And we haven't done a terrible job at it, but we haven't always given Lincoln Kienholz his just due. That for starters, there were 2 of the 3 practices in the spring we got to watch. Stefan, you were at all 3 of them. Lincoln Kienholz was better in 2 of the 3 of them, right? You froze.
I did. I was at the practices and I saw Lincoln Kienholz. That's where I cut off.
Okay. Would you say that in the spring, in the 3 windows we had, from a football standpoint, this is not intangible stuff, this is just football standpoint, Lincoln Kienholz was the better quarterback?
Yeah, probably.
Okay, cool. So 2-1, Lincoln's winning the football battle. We're not talking about intangibles yet because we don't even know that he's about to be an Iron Buckeye. Who would you say won day 1 of fall camp when we were out there?
Without going into like caveats and context, I would say Lincoln Kienholz.
Just like, flat out, black and white. Okay, so 3-1, Lincoln Kienholz is up. Who won day 2?
Probably Julian Sand.
Okay, so 3-2. Who won day 3?
It was pretty even. I didn't walk out of day 3 feeling like there was a winner.
Okay, so we'll give both of them half a point.
I thought day 3 Julian was the.
You thought Julian won day 3?
Was better.
Well, we can give it to Julian then.
So 3-3. And we're not talking about intangibles. We're talking about strictly football things. It's 3-3. And I think sometimes we have talked about this battle on this podcast as if like Julian Sand is the second coming of Drew Brees, while Lincoln Kienholz can't throw the ball past 7 yards. And that is objectively not true. So I do agree with the element that Lincoln Kienholz has maximized what his description has always been, because, Andrew, it's the same description that Luke Fahey is going to have when he gets here in January. Focus on long-term development. This is not a situation like it was with CJ or Justin or even Julian, where you're expecting in year 2 they're going to be ready from a talent standpoint to take over. Develop. He had to throw a wrench in his because he had to get thrown out there in the Cotton Bowl. But then the Cotton Bowl showed us why it was so important to focus on, how about you spend 2 years working, and then in year 3 you take your best shot. I think Lincoln is taking his best shot while also showing what separates him. He can make most of the throws. I think the downfield passing element is probably where Julian Sand probably has such a gap between him and Lincoln Kienholz from a talent standpoint, and just how quick his release is and whatnot. His game is a NFL scout's dream, right? From an arm talent standpoint. You know what else can be an NFL scout's dream? Watching your quarterback be able to windmill dunk, have a +4 handicap, be able to make somebody miss and still make off-platform throws. And I think that's what Lincoln Kienholz's game is. And I think Lincoln Kienholz has done a better job, to an extent. He probably did a better job entering the spring, leaving the spring, closing the gap between where he and Julian and Sand were from an arm talent standpoint, than Julian Sand did in closing the gap between where he and Lincoln Kienholz were from an intangible standpoint. Now the question is, has Sand started to close that gap even more to where it's not a question mark? Because if the intangibles are equal, you take Sand. If the tangibles are unequal, that's how it's August 11th when we're recording this and August 12th when people are hearing it, and we still don't know who Ohio State's starting quarterback is.
What would it take for you to predict Lincoln Kienholz starts? Is it just Ryan Day saying Lincoln Kienholz is a starter?
Because it doesn't feel like I just said all that just to say, I still think Julian Sand's going to be a starting quarterback.
I was literally going to ask you that.
It feels like you were going to say all that and be like, but Julian Sand's going to start for this team.
I hate this quarterback battle so much. It's because I feel like all of us are doing this thing where it's starting to come off like we're trying to create a battle that's not really a battle. When I think two things can be true. If Nick Saban didn't retire and Julian is still at Alabama right now and Lincoln Kienholz is just his team starting quarterback, I think they would be fine. I think that can be true while also saying that the guy who has the most upside from an arm talent standpoint, to Andrew's point, is probably going to win this battle. What would make me change that? If we had another day of practice to watch this week.
Or if we could watch the scrimmage. One thing I will say, though, that I liked Ryan Day talking about is, like, we talk so much about the lack of experience and what the quarterback's got to do. And I had just asked, like, how much does it help to have Carson Hinsman when both the quarterbacks are not very experienced? And it kind of went into this thing of Ryan Day just being like, at some point, like, you got to just kind of throw these guys in the fire. Like, Lincoln already experienced that in the Cotton Bowl. And, you know, this will obviously be a whole new level of it, playing against Texas and being a starter for the season if he is the starter. Julian obviously has never started a game at the collegiate level. And it's, okay, this guy looked good in scrimmage, and this guy has, you know, quick release, but this guy has great leadership, and he's in the weight room, and this guy's, you know, got the better deep ball, and it's this and it's that. Like, you know, Monday at practice, this guy looked great. Tuesday at practice, this guy looked great. And it's like, at some point, one of these two quarterbacks is like, Ryan Day's just going to have to say, go. Colin Simmons is on the other side. Jeremiah Smith's on your side. I don't know. Do something about it. And maybe it doesn't look good against Texas, but you're hoping that by the time you get to Michigan, it looks pretty damn good. You're hoping that by the time you open the season with Ball State next year, it looks pretty good. Well, I don't know. At some point, we can project as much as we can. One of these guys is just going to have to go do it. And then we'll come on here and say whether it was the wrong decision, whether it was the right decision, whether the guy's good enough, whether he's not good enough, and we'll evaluate that. But, like, at some point, there's only so much Ryan Day can do to simulate this battle. And if he just thinks Julian Sand is the better quarterback, then throw him in the fire and see what happens. There's so many elements we're talking about where it's like, at the end of the day, you kind of don't really know until the clock has hit zero and the game against Texas is over. Maybe you have some kind of an idea.
And I have a better answer for you. And it's the reason why I think we all keep giving these long spiels and then going, with that being said, I still think Julian Sand's going to be the starting. If we had ever reached the point where it felt like, when you're trying to read in between the lines of how Ryan Day's talking about Julian Sand, it felt like he wasn't starting to develop the intangible part of it, then I would have said I think Lincoln Kienholz is going to win that battle. But even if it's a slow and steady race, it does seem like Julian is developing that part of things. Plus the way he keeps talking about Julian Sand's decision-making and his arm talent is just... But some of that is because we keep asking directly about Julian Sand. We're not going, hey, what do you like about Lincoln Kienholz? We're going, hey, what do you like about Julian Sand? Because we all think he's going to be the starting quarterback. But if we had gotten an inkling that Sand was not developing the thing that, quite frankly, in college football is probably like 55% of the equation of what makes a good quarterback, then maybe I'd be saying by now that I think Lincoln Kienholz is actually going to win.
This is an interesting conversation because I think when we did one of those rewatchables, we talked about that Ohio State-Texas game in 2005 and Tressel kind of bungling that quarterback situation where they tried two and then they didn't really know what they were doing. And then they put in Troy Smith and he looked awesome. And then for some reason they took him out. And like, not to poo-poo this awesome game that's going to happen in a few weeks, but that game in 2005 definitely had more consequence to it in terms of like what that meant for the rest of your season. And I think there is part of me that is sitting there thinking to myself, like, at some point, like you said, Steven, I think it was you, Steven, where it was like, you got to make a decision. One, so you can get ready for Texas, but two, if you pick Julian and then it's evident at the end of that game that you shouldn't have picked Julian, or at the very least, both quarterbacks still have a ways to go, it is not the death knell that it was once upon a time, right? And I think there is that element of this of like, maybe you should just get this over with to say, let's get our guy, let's get him as ready as possible to play the number one team in the country. Let's get him as ready as possible for maybe the toughest test of the season. I mean, they do play Penn State. They're probably going to play somebody really good in the playoffs, multiple teams like that. So it's like, maybe this is the toughest thing you're going to do all year in terms of like the defense you're going to play. It's like, all right, well, if we get this guy ready for that environment, you kind of get over the mountaintop a little bit, or at least for the next couple of weeks. So I don't hate this notion of just figure it out. And then if you make the wrong decision, you play Grambling in Ohio, and then you have a bye week in the next 3 weeks after that. Though I understand that's not ideal. I understand that's not what you want. I understand that shouldn't be your plan A, B, or C, but it is out there of just, you know what? Like, if we pick Julian and we're wrong, we do have a little bit more wiggle room than we would have 5 years ago.
Yeah, but the problem is you're not going to know if you're wrong or right after one.
You could. I think you could.
Okay,
I mean, like, if Julian goes out there and shreds, you're going to be like, we made the right decision. If Julian goes out there and he's god awful, you mentioned like 5 picks. Like, if he goes out there and does
like that, but again, those are extremes because that's an extreme thing. The one thing I do like that Ryan Day keeps talking about is you can't like, it's not a one-day decision. You got to look at the trends. And if Julian Sand goes out there and throws 5 picks, he would have shown that. Unless their picks are not really his fault, it's, a receiver ran the wrong route, or Texas's DBs jumped some passes, right? And it's more about somebody making a play than him making it a bad decision. If you're going to go out there and if Julian's going out there throwing 3, 4, 5 picks in a game, you would have saw that for 2 years that Julian Sand was going to go out there and throw 3, 4, 5 picks in a game. That doesn't just pop up on Saturday. Months of data that you just ignored for the sake of he's got a quick release. So that's why you're not going to know. Because if you would have known, then in 2021, when CJ lost to Oregon and he didn't look good in the first half against Minnesota, people were going, oh, are we wrong? Oh, is he wrong? I mean, DJ and Bryce are lighting things up at Alabama and Clemson. Here's CJ, he's losing games. Maybe you're wrong. You can't. Whoever they pick is going to be the starting quarterback in 2025. Now, if we get to that second bye week and things haven't gotten better, sure. But at the same time, it's not like they benched Kyle McCord in 2023 and gave Devin Brown the opportunity, right? So it's. I don't think they are approaching this as much of a let's get through this game, and if we need to make drastic changes like change our quarterback, we can do that. Now, do I think that could be happening on the offensive line and at some other positions? Of course, but those are more easily seamless in terms of making changes. You are going to fundamentally change your offense if you change your quarterback in this situation. So it's why he takes so long. He wants as much data as possible so that when you get to the game, good or bad, you're not shocked by anything either one of these quarterbacks does when they get on the field, because you have months and months and months of data that show you, okay, he might make these mistakes. Okay, he might do this well. And you let the outliers be just that, outliers. So maybe next week, I would assume next week we're going to know who the starting quarterback is. I was maybe expecting to hear different language in terms of, and I think even Adam King said it, like, are you starting to see separation? And Day didn't want to go there, which also means that he knows that we're catching on to how his lingo is. He's changing up how he talks about things. But I would expect next week we have a starting quarterback. I still think it's going to be Julian. I think both of you still think it's going to be Julian. But we also acknowledge that Lincoln might have a role regardless, especially in the run game. But he has done more than enough that if some things go a different way and Julian doesn't end up at Ohio State because Nick Saban retired, I don't think we would be concerned about the quarterback position, which is the whole point of why Ryan Day goes through this exercise. Let's take a break, and then I want to talk about Austin Sierrabell and the offensive line.
Hey, it's Paris. You know I love sparkly things, right? Like stars. Duh. And thanks to Hilton and Auto Camp, I just slept under them. Picture me, serving looks by the fire outside my luxurious Airstream, making s'mores with the kids, while a national park is our backdrop. The great outdoors meets Hilton hospitality. That's hot. Explore all the new ways to stay at Hilton.com. Hilton for the stay.
Your backyard barbecue has some new RSVPs. Just tap Target. With the grill raring to go, your personal shopper is tackling your same-day delivery order at Target.
Babe, so Bob and Lynn are bringing the kids after all.
Pro tip, you can change your same-day order with a quick text to your shopper.
I'll have her add popsicles. Ooh, and some sidewalk chalk.
Your shopper texts a thumbs up. You text 5 exclamation points and life is good. Text with a personal shopper and get it all delivered ASAP. Just tap Target.
We're back here on Buckeye Talk. Stephen Mean, Stefan Krajisnik, and Andrew Gillis. Couple of things Ryan Day got asked about that he didn't really explore right now because they're still in fall camp mode more than prepare to play a game mode right now. He got asked, is there a plan to rotate at cornerback and defensive back in general? He didn't necessarily say yes or no to that. Though I did like the way he talked about Jermaine Matthews. I'd like that a lot. He was very complimentary of him, not just as a player, but as a leader. Still kind of evaluating Jalen McClain and Malik Hartford, but it does sound like both of those guys are going to play. But the big thing, Andrew, is Austin Saraville going to play left tackle against Texas?
Seems like it. Ryan Day obviously came out and said that Austin Saraville was now repping solely at left tackle, and that is not hey, Austin Saraville is repping solely at left tackle because we think he's our backup. No, Austin Saraville seems like he's kind of moved into that starting role at left tackle. He mentioned a bunch of different guys when he got asked. He, kind of went through this guy's inside, this guy's outside, this guy's blah, blah. Mm-hmm. Said Phillip Daniels has been playing tackle. He said that Ethan Nyanwa has been playing tackle as a swing guy, but some guard as well. Believe the follow-up, I forget who asked the follow-up, but it was somebody asked, is it fair to say Phillip Daniels has overtaken Ethan Nyanwa? And Ryan kind of sat back and he went, I guess we'll find out this week. And that's a really interesting conversation because that's the right side of the offensive line, but it feels like going into Texas, the guy who's going to be protecting Julian Sayin or Lincoln Keen-Holtz's blind side is going to be Austin Saraville, kind of the offensive line hero of the offseason. And I said this in our video afterwards, I think this boils down mostly to one thing, and that is, of all the tackles that they have on this roster, the guy you want protecting an inexperienced quarterback's blind side is Austin Saraville. You trust him the most out of anybody on this line. And I think there's reason to say, okay, maybe we shouldn't be as high on Nyanwa. I think there's reason to say, like, okay, why did everybody tell us that Nyanwa had been the starter for 8 months and now all of a sudden here we are and we're going, what's going on here with Nyanwa? I think it's a little bit of push-pull where you feel really good about what you've got with Saraville at left tackle. And there's like, okay, maybe the right tackle spot might end up being a little bit more of a question than we thought. I mean, it doesn't have to be specifically, at least when it comes to left tackle, a negative story. I think this is wow, we should all be very impressed with what Austin Saraville has done because he has kind of pushed himself into that role of, all right, you're going to ask him to maybe have the toughest job of anybody on Ohio State's offense outside of quarterback against Texas, and they're giving that role, it sounds like, to Austin Saraville.
Along with applauding Austin Saraville, what a job by Ryan Day. I think Justin Fry is probably still part of this conversation based on when the transfers came in, now Tyler Bowen.
Not doing it.
Now Tyler Bowen, too. Of just, not only did Donovan Jackson and Josh Simmons go in the first round, Josh Fryer also left. Zen Mahalski transferred, and George Fitzpatrick transferred. So you lost this offseason 5 tackles who, in theory, had they stayed on the roster, would have been contending for starting spots in 2025. Right? If Donovan Jackson or Josh Simmons or Josh Fryer were still here, we would be penciling them in as starters. George Fitzpatrick, though it wasn't great at times, in theory, were lining up to be starters or at least have a big role in 2025. So, you lose those 5 guys, and you go out and get Phillip Daniels and Ethan Onwunyawa, and a lot of schools, and maybe even Ohio State, the way we projected it, you bring in those 2 guys and we're saying, all right, those are your 2 starting tackles because you got to put them there because they're maybe the best equipped to do that now. And instead, it's August 11th, August 12th as you're listening, and those 2 guys, along with probably Ian Moore as well, are competing for one spot because you've got a guy who's, he's fine at left tackle. We'll put him at left tackle. You feel good about all your interior spots. So it's instead of, hey, we went and got Ethan Onwunyawa and Phillip Daniels and they have to start for us, otherwise we're screwed. Mm-hmm. Now you're like, all right, those 2 guys can compete with another guy for a starting spot and we're fine everywhere else. Ohio State is genuinely 3 to 4 deep at offensive tackle And that comes after losing 5 guys and only bringing in 2.
Somehow Justin Fry left this room in great shape. Who would have thought? Does anybody want to, in hindsight, we did our Mark It Down Mondays for All Americans. Does anybody want to, in hindsight, add Austin Cervelt to their list?
Because I was still counting him as a tackle in the All-American list.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just making sure.
I get where Steven's coming from of just like maybe we've been underselling Ceraveld. However,
we have been underselling.
I'm just glad I didn't pick Anyanwa as an all.
He still might start. It's just
he still might start, but compare that to where we were 3 weeks ago, where we were like Ethan Anyanwa was this team starting left tackle, and then now on August 11th, Steven goes, I don't know, man, maybe back off. He might start. Like that's not the trajectory you're looking for when you want to pick an All-American. You want to go from, this guy's going to start to this guy's going to be amazing, not this guy's going to start and he's going to be pretty good to, I don't know, man. I think he'll be out there at some point.
We had a texter mention Will Smith Jr. as a potential All-American. It's possible.
Yeah, man. You never know what might happen. I think Austin Cervelt is going to be a starting left tackle. I think Philip Daniels is making a strong case for why there's so much depth in this offensive line room. I think Ryan Day is also using us a little bit to push Ethan. Because he said something a few weeks ago. I think it might have been at Big Ten Media Days he was talking about, just because you get brought in as a transfer doesn't mean you're automatically going to be a starter. And I think sometimes that we do it too. There's this element of you're using the portal and you find a starter. It's like, no, we're using the portal to help our room. You have to still go win the job. And I'm wondering if how much of that is, especially with the Philip Daniels stuff, how much of that is that element versus this is like an actual real battle. But it'll be something to watch. And we're going to talk with Tyler Bowen. Today, as you're listening to this, actually, we're talking with the offensive line today, so we'll probably get more insight on that. So get to text 614-350-3315, 2-week free trial, $3.99. After that, no quarterback yet. We're less than 20 days away from Ohio State playing on August 30th against Texas, number 1 versus number 3, though. It's probably a fair assumption to say by this time next week, Ohio State will know who its starting quarterback is. 614-350-3315. It's a 2-week free trial, $3.99 after that. For Stefan Krajisnik and Andrew Gillis, I'm Stephen Means, and that was Buckeye Talk.